experience. Let's jump in with our host, Dylan Watkins, as he introduces today's guest.
Welcome, Young Adventurers. Dylan here. And on today's podcast, I'd like to introduce Howard Rose. He is a veteran of the VR industry, designer, entrepreneur, and part of the first-hand technologies, focusing on virtual reality for healthcare and other types of technologies that help you with educations and the like. And we'll keep this short and sweet because we've got a lot to talk about with Howard. And so without any further delay, I'd like to introduce Howard Rose.
Hello.
Hey, brother. How you doing?
It's a pleasure to be here.
Oh,
Thank you.
We have seemed to lost your audio for some reason. It might just be me. Technology. It's a wonderful thing. This is Howard. I think we're working to get his audio online. I'm not too sure what happened with it. It was just working a hot minute ago.
Do you want to do that intro again?
And Howard, I'll give you a thumbs up. Can you hear me right now?
Yeah. Can you hear me?
I can't hear you right now. I'll give you a thumbs up when it works.
I didn't change anything. So do you want to try that again?
Yeah, I'm not too sure what's going on with this.
Let's mute and unmute.
Yeah, we might have to change out the audio settings.
Change anything?
All right. Hold on.
Wait. Here, I'm gonna.
We'll be back, everybody. We'll be back.
Oh,
it works. Technology.
Wait. Is what I did? Do you want to do the intro again and or you want to cut it, or?
Yeah, we'll cut.
You don't need to hear
this. We'll cut it. Actually.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay. Go.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to a live podcast, seeing how all these unfold. We're going to be cutting these things together just for some audio technical difficulties, but kicking off this podcast, we're introducing Howard Rose and part of First Hand Technologies. Howard, it is good to hear your voice.
Oh, it is great to be here. Thank you.
Thank you, brother. Of course. I know that you're a VR veteran in the space. I mean, I remember seeing you around. Did you go to the Oculus Connects? I know I've seen your face around a ton. I feel like we swam in the same circles, but we may have just never spent too much time together.
Yeah, well, I'm always swimming in circles. So if you see that fin out there in the ocean going like this, that's me. Yeah, I was at Oculus Connect a couple times. I was the first one where I was very excited to see. I was sitting in a session, and they flashed up a big picture of Snow World, which is an application that I worked on for many years with folks out of the University of Washington. So it warmed the cockles of me heart to see that. And it was really exciting to see that kind of used as really the one of the strongest justifications for using virtual reality in pain relief and helping people with health problems and therapy.
Yeah. I remember seeing Snow World as well. I remember I was out there first Oculus Connect as well, and it's really interesting because there seems to be a lot of major use cases for being in virtual reality and medical. There's a lot of reasons why that makes a ton of sense, but also it's kind of a lot of new knowledge, because I know there's groups that are getting into that now, but you're ahead of that. I mean, back in the day, how did you get into virtual reality and pain management in the medical space before, Oculus even had their Oculus Connect?
Yeah, I guess I was doing VR before Oculus invented it. So do this briefly. I got my start in virtual reality at the University of Washington as a grad student in the Human Interface Technology Lab that was run by Tom Furness. And Tom has always been an interesting mentor for me, and kind of, if you don't know Tom, he is sort of the godfather of virtual reality. He's the person who was doing it very early, before or at the same time as Ivan Sutherland in the military, and then he left the military and started the Human Interface Technology Lab, the HIT Lab. So I had the joy of that's how I got into it. and it was such an exciting time to be in, this budding field. Nothing worked. The headsets weighed a ton. They were, but it was exciting. I mean, you really didn't care, except when you put it on a child's head. I mean, we had a headset that weighed 7.5 pounds, and we called it the pizza box. But so I was working on a project called the Virtual Reality Roving Vehicle, the VRRV. Yeehaw! And it was the project to take virtual reality systems out into schools and teach kids to build virtual worlds and give them experiences. So I did my graduate work in education, educational technology, and that's always been near and dear to my heart.
That's great. Yeah, that headset sounds like a scoliosis maker. Oh,
yeah. Well, the experience of we had them chasing sharks and with a net. That was like one of the applications, and the first experience of VR was like this. Their necks couldn't handle their little necks could not handle the 7.5 pounds, but they were excited.
Yeah, The kids will struggle with especially with virtual reality. They will endure so much if they are engaged with what they're doing. So even if they have to hold up their heads, I mean, I've demoed VRs to like 6-year-olds where they're just wrapping their arms around the headset trying to hold on with the IDP I'm sure is off and all that jazz, but they'll suffer through lots in order to do that.
Yes, and they're still forming, so hopefully we're not hurting them long term.
Just a little drop in the bucket. It's not, they didn't take it home with them, And in terms of the education, I did an educational hackathon years ago where it was all about learning and growing and building with part of our community. And this guy took like a Wii controller and hooked it up to a skateboard, and you would dodge sharks, and then when you hit a shark, you'd blow up. And I was like, this is great. How is this education? And he's like, well, sharks are bad and they're dangerous, so I'm teaching you that.
Actually, sharks are not bad, and that's a problem.
Okay.
I mean, sharks are essential. Sharks get a bad rap, but I mean, they're they're important species.
They're important, but they're also top of the food chain. So I agree with you fully. But would you swim next to one in the open ocean? Is another.
I have.
You have?
I scuba dive. So when you see sharks, they're amazing. But anyway, now we're talking about sharks.
Yeah.
It's not really my fault. But I think what your example raises an interesting point about education and VR. So, we learn by doing. I believe that I'm a big proponent of, do it, don't just talk about it. And virtual reality is a great way to understand a phenomenon like physics or math or something, to get an intuitive understanding of it before you go to some sort of abstraction like an equation or something like that. The thing about VR is that it is a preconscious experience. So the reason VR works is because it is pre-attentive. So if we had to put mental energy into making it work, we wouldn't get presence, we wouldn't get immersion, we wouldn't get all the cool things that we got. So kind of what you need to understand is that it is by nature pre-conscious. It's going straight into the lizard brain. And when you do things, you can, my motto for, of course, health and for education, do no harm, right? So it's really easy. It's tempting. I mean, it's totally cool. I totally get it. It must be really fun to skateboard and blow up sharks. But like, let's not call it education, right? So
I totally agree. And it was one of those things that he's like, look, I'm gonna do this because it's fun and I want to do it, and I'm gonna find an excuse to do it, which is I think why a lot of people do virtual reality, they get into it because it's fun, exciting, and there's a magic to this, that sense of presence that you never had before. And then they try to bolt on whatever they find interesting and then call it a thing, and I've seen that. I mean, they do it in the medical space, they do it in so many other spaces. People get into it where they're like, I come from a background of doing film work, so I'm gonna do 360 film, and so I'm gonna bring that into the space, even though it may or may not have a space for it. They're trying to bring the thing that they're passionate about and what they're good at into this new meeting that excites them, to try to find a home that they fit in, right? And so sometimes it fits, and sometimes you blow up sharks. It's just how it goes. With that, with preconscious, are you talking about you're experiencing it before you get a logical chance to feel it? So you're talking about like embodied cognition type of stuff. So you're getting direct sensory input from your body versus actually processing it to your brain first. Is that what you mean by that, or am I off the mark?
Well, our senses work. So we have very, very robust sensory systems.
Mm-hmm.
And if you think about where you're sitting right now, think about your chair. You're
Mm-hmm.
sitting on this beautiful gaming chair, I see. But we don't pay attention to our body connecting to the chair, but it's connecting all the time. So attention, so the sensation is there, we just ignore it,
Mm-hmm.
right? So there's a whole bunch about our environment that comes in, and we only have a certain capacity in our brains to focus on what's important.
Mm-hmm.
So while we're looking over there, I mean, there's the very famous invisible gorilla. The invisible gorilla where they did the, they're playing basketball and they're throwing the basketball around. Then they have a gorilla walk through the video, and then they show it to people, and people don't notice there's a gorilla, right? Yeah. So I love it. The invisible gorilla is a great example of how so much, we filter. And so the preconscious nature of VR is really about the phenomenon of presence and immersion. Presence and immersion work because they go directly to our sensory systems, our visual systems, our physiological systems. We get a proprioceptive sense that the space is real. It creates a space. That's really exciting, and it's wonderful. On the other side of that, what it means is that a whole bunch of things are coming in that we may or may not pay attention to. But we're getting a lot of different messages. We're getting a lot of different messages from the environment, from the design, from the, here's a great example. Think about product placement in VR.
Mm-hmm.
Why does that, Chevy keep driving back and forth, right? I don't pay attention to it, but it's there. I don't pay attention to that billboard. It's the smell of cookies. So, there's all sorts of things that can seep into our sort of pre-conscious awareness. And there's a lot of beauty to that. Like that's something we harness, that I harness as a designer for building health applications, to help people get motivated, to help them in lots of different ways. And the flip side of that is you got to be careful, because what you're showing them, can have a real lasting effect.
100%. So I see what you're saying there. Excuse me. With the, I mean, there's a lot of responsibility being a designer. Apologize about that. There's a lot of responsibility about being a designer.
Responsibility.
Yes. Abraham Lincoln, or possibly Ben from Spider-Man. It's a very powerful thing, because you are taking over someone's entire senses. And I know when we were doing a lot of hackathons back in the day, like horror hackathons or things that terrify you are super easy, because you can't even put your hands over your eyes. And it can be traumatizing. But I mean, essentially, as a designer, the whole point, whatever you do, whether you're writing plays for, or you're writing screenplays for movies, or you're building, the next Candy Crush. It doesn't matter. As a designer, the whole point is to make people feel. At the end of the day, you're giving people sensations of feelings. That's what they're going for, which is a great responsibility, because you can design whatever you want to, and the most powerful impact, the most powerful system you can use as a designer is virtual reality, in terms of like total takeover. So you want to be wary of that. Have you seen that go terribly awry on your side? Has there been situations, whether something that you have built or someone else has built, that had a overall negative impact on somebody because of improper designs?
Well, I can give you some examples of things I've seen, but I think there's sort of there's some observations that are pretty interesting. One is that, we've put people into virtual worlds,
Mm-hmm.
kids and adults, and they come out and they will tell us they saw something that wasn't in the world, that something happened that actually doesn't happen in the world, but especially kids, they'll fill in a lot of details.
Huh.
Like, I went for this monster and it did this. And it's like, well, the monster doesn't actually do that, but that's okay. So there's sort of the way that we fill in details.
Mm.
A very real world non-VR example of that is if you look at like witness testimony.
Oh, so
and reliability of witnesses, and how they can fill in details about an accident. People have done studies. Elizabeth Loftus has done some great work, and some other folks. But like, we will fill in details about the car that we saw hit the pedestrian, even though they didn't really happen. So in virtual reality, that's a potential, that we fill in details that aren't there. Another one is agency, is the ability to control things. So we can sometimes feel like we have control over things that we don't have control over, just by virtue of the way the thing is developed, the way the thing it works. You get the illusion. A very simple example is putting somebody on a rail moving through an environment. They'll sometimes think they're driving, or that they're in control in a way that they're not. So why did you go into that room? I wanted to go there. No, actually, you were taken there. So, these things, I don't want to make them out to be like super sinister, but they're aspects of the experience that we as designers should understand. And in terms of other applications, I don't really want to call specific people out, but I think I've seen things that have been they are, quote, news, real reenactments or real experiences of X, of going to this refugee camp, or of this domestic violence thing, or of this other thing. And the reality is they're not real. The reality is that somebody planned exactly what it is and the perspective. And they did it for sort of a dramatic reason, usually. Like, they want you to get a certain feeling. But as you said, with horror, I mean, scaring somebody in VR is the easiest thing to do in the world. Yeah. It's so easy to frighten people. It's just not, it's like the lowest hanging fruit. And I think that there's a way in which things that pretend, or let's say, not say pretend, things that claim to have some veracity, to claim to have some basis in, this is how that event happened at war, this is how that event happened here. By virtue of what you show and don't show, you are you're imposing a bias. You're saying, why did you show it from this perspective? If I want somebody to feel like X country is in chaos, I can do that very easily. I can put them in a place that may exist, that may have happened, but they could be at ground zero. Like, imagine if you were at ground zero at, the World Trade Center.
Mm.
And said that was what the United States is. It's like, I mean, that's an oversimplification, and probably nobody's going to do that, but you get the idea. It's like, if we did that in Syria, we did that in Kosovo.
But it's also if you look at that, I mean, you're talking about a couple of things, right? I mean, anytime you have creative license and you have a piece of art that may not be factually accurate, but emotionally true. So certain things that maybe didn't really happen, but you really want to give that sensation of the people being there, you dramatize it, you go up on it. And I guess it ultimately comes down to, like, what is the effects of that? If it's to get people to empathize, to take action, support a cause, donate now, whatever that thing might be. I mean, it could ultimately be for good if you're allowing people to generate more empathy that will overall decrease real life human real world suffering, right? So
but who, just to throw it out because we're having this conversation, I mean, what if I'm a white supremacist? I mean, I'm not everybody is benevolent, and how does race get portrayed? Mm-hmm. Look at how race gets portrayed on television. Mm-hmm. And the people who get to, history is owned by the people who get to tell it, right? So if you think about augmented reality, and you're putting layers on top of our environment, you could be, who gets to say who whose history gets told?
The one who writes it. At the end of the day, it's whoever writes it. Whoever, those stone tablets we found in Egypt, who knows if they're true or not? They just exist. I mean, and that's the same. The challenge with that, it's whoever is got the willingness, the tenacity, the gall, the whatever you want to call it, to create an experience, is the person who you're now going to live through it. And every single story that has ever been told has been told through the lens of someone else's perspective. So, like, if I tell you a story, like, the way that we communicate knowledge and information and emotion is through storytelling. And the way storytelling is done is from human to human. You're never going to implicitly remove any of those biases of the person telling the story, whether or not they're white supremacists or whether or not they're insert any of the things that you do. I just don't know how the challenge is like, stories like VR, like any other thing, is a tool in technology. And so, like with a knife, I can cut a car seat thing and free someone from a burning car, or I could stab somebody. The problem is it's stories and VR are still just tools being used by the end user, and what they do with it is, for good or for ill. It's a magnification of human intent and will, right? And so, we're not perfect, so I don't know, how would you get away from that? Like, would we bar all white supremacists from using the technology, or how would you, like, what do you do against a situation like that that's a powerful technology, and that stories are going to be told that maybe don't necessarily benefit mankind?
Yeah, well, I mean, I don't run the zoo, and nobody's going to ask me if X person can use VR. But I think so. The point is, it's an important question. How do we get the good? How do we get the benefit? And how do we minimize, all of that problem behavior? How do we minimize the negative impact?
How do we, Howard?
So I think there's two pieces. One is the responsibility of the designer, and the other is educating and creating literacy, media literacy among the people who experience it. right now, today, most people have not experienced VR, and if they have, they've done one or two things. Um, and so I think it's our position to try to explain this in ways that make sense and ways that don't seem reactionary and, Luddite, but that really help people understand what a virtual experience is. And so part of the work that I'm doing is trying to figure out how to translate that both to help designers to create better virtual experiences and also to help users go, okay, like number one, all VR is not created equal. Like there's good VR, there's bad VR, there's like stuff that'll make you sick. There's lots of there's a huge range. It's like saying all movies are the same. They're not all the same. So is to help people develop the sophistication and the vocabulary and the ability to say, oh, I'm gonna pay attention to some of the things that I probably wouldn't pay attention to otherwise. Like, is something like trying to influence me in a certain way? The way I put it is that, you think about the cell phone, right? So the cell phone, there are billions of people and things on the other side of this phone trying to break through that screen and influence me, like social media bots, Russians, you name it, people selling widgets. Imagine what happens when that's not a screen that's outside of me, but it's something that I'm in. It's the water that I'm swimming in. And so just like we have some really negative fallout of social media, but we're not trying to get rid of it, what we need to do is to help people to be aware, to filter, to understand that not everything there that pretends to be true is true, and to develop that sophistication around virtual reality, which, as I said, is a pre-conscious experience. So you have to bring a little more extra consciousness to it.
Yeah, and it's definitely, with new technology and new data, humans need time to climatize to the situation, desensitize their sensations. If you give a 5-year-old a cell phone for the first time and you just let them go off the deep end, it's going to take a long time for them to it's a lot of power to be put in the little one's hands that they have no ability to emotionally control who or what they do inside the experience. And VR definitely is a magnified experience because you're now taking over the entirety of their reality to go through it. How do you, from a designer's perspective, do you have like your 10 principles for design? How do you educate designers on the importance and the importance and the care that they need to create when crafting these experiences for people? Do you have them laid out? Is there an overall motto, or like what does that look like in terms of, because there's two sides, educating the public and educating the people that build things for the public or the private.
Right. I actually do have my 10. I'll spare you all the 10, but I'll give you a few of them. I think that number one is you really need to understand. So let me, my bias, my perspective is I am trying to use virtual reality to help people be better in some way.
Love it.
And it's up to them to decide what better is, but that's to either healthier, better, smarter, stronger, more resilient, more mindful, happier. So I'm really interested in uses of VR that take you from here to here.
Transformative.
Right, that are transformative. And so entertainment's great. It's not what particularly I'm talking about, but it is relevant. So number one is really to understand. So I totally agree with what you said. To change people, to help people change, people change when their stories change. And so you think about how you change someone's story, or how you help them change their own story, really. And there's an element of persuasion here, but we're really trying to help people find their own, construct their own knowledge. So number one is to understand the target story that you want to change. Really understand where those people are and what is their story, kinda. And I can give you some examples. And then what is the target story that we want to change for them? So let me give you an example. So I designed something. We worked on a big project. It's called Attack of the S Mutans. So people can find it at attackofthemutans.com. We built this VR-based museum exhibit to try to get children 8 to 12 to take better care of their teeth. And we got funded by the National Institute of Health and did a big research project with the University of Washington Dental School. It's a big project. We did it at the Pacific Science Center in Seattle. And so, it was super interesting. So it's a public health initiative trying to get people to take better care of themselves. Great motive. We got a group of kids they're tweens. They think they're immortal. They're not going to listen to anybody, especially mom. And so I spent a lot of time talking to these kids, watching them brush their teeth, talking to them about what they thought the story was. And so I need to know exactly what it is and where the levers are. So I think the first thing that we as designers need to do is understand that the users is not us. It's not, they could be very, very different. Mm-hmm. And that's actually really the fun and exciting part. I think that's actually super interesting. So number one, understand the target, understand the audience and the target you want to change. Keep your story simple. So Attack of the S Mutans is, very briefly, it's about why you brush your teeth. You brush your teeth because there's these things called biofilm, which are all these bacteria that live in this really cool way. The more you know about bacteria, the more frightening it is, but the more interesting it is. And they poop out acid onto your teeth. They
acid poop.
They're acid poopers. They turn sugars into acid, and that acid is what burns your teeth, what creates cavities. So teaching kids, not turning them into microbiologists, but teaching them that that sugar plus time plus acid equals cavities. And you take away any one of those, you don't have cavities. So that's a pretty simple thing. A plus B plus C and equals problem. So the user's not you. Make your story simple so it sticks. And, I think, of course, we want to make it fun. But I do think that we really need to understand how, there's an element of psychology to this about how people change. We need to, the more you can found your activity based on some sort of sound tested theory and then measure it. I could go on, but so basically there's a lot of things that we as designers can do if you take the task seriously. And VR is just an endless trough. It's an endless well of possibility. There's so much we can do. It's just wonderful.
We're literally building worlds and universes of our own design and imaginations. We are becoming gods in this virtual land that you put people through. So ultimately that is some of the challenges, responsibilities, and beauties of having to build these worlds. And what's interesting with these kids, as always, when you're talking about, it just created such a visual for me of acid pooping on your teeth, these bacteria pooping acid on your teeth. How easily? Say what?
Lots of fart sounds. Yes,
I bet, but that would get kids to resonate and pay attention and get that. There's two things I want to touch on right, is two things, because stories are a part of identity, but then you're also talking about measurement, right? Those are two issues right there. So you're talking about not only changing the story, but I mean, behind that underlying story, you have an identity structure that's built up about the person. That removing that story, you have to remove that identity, and that's one of the biggest challenges you're coming from, because that enough of those stories stack up in identity. And then how do you measure? One, how do you change the underlying identity that is supported by said story? And then how do you measure the effectiveness other than people placating you and marking, yes, I totally feel transformed now on the final survey? So how do those two things correlate with your design?
Identity is an interesting word because I think there's some ethics about persuasion that are definitely worth thinking about. But to kind of skip over
Ethics
that,
side.
I think yeah, who wants to talk about that? I think that okay, let's do the other piece first. Listen, self-report is terrible.
Yeah.
You can't ask somebody, especially a kid, did you learn anything? But you see it if you are judicious and have some experience doing this. You know how to ask the questions, but you also know what to look for. Mm-hmm. And if one example that just comes to mind is we had a kid who, in an exit interview, he said, it made me want to brush better. And so he got the connection between, he got the connection between his experience and his own behavior. He didn't say it made me want to brush more. It made me want to do what I do better. And the great thing is that once you have that sort of flash of realization, you can't turn it off. You can ignore it. You can say, I'm too tired and I'm not going to go brush, but you can't get rid of it. And I think that that's what we want to, when you talk about changing people's stories, it's really about, I have this observation on the word story. So story has both a sort of a knowledge and a wisdom component, like telling stories and they get passed down. It also has a kind of a structural piece to it, like the stories of a building. And stories are both simultaneously the way that we understand the world and also the way that we store information in our brains. Yeah. So, I pull out my stories. There's a psychological word, schema or whatever, but I pull out my stories and apply them to my experiences about the world. And that's how I get through life. I have ways of understanding and reacting and responding and acting. So it's both it's the unit that we keep, that actually we store things in our brains, like the myths and the archetypes and all of that, the hero's journey, which is something that we can talk about. But and it's also the way that we interact with the world. So when you change somebody's story, or you help them change their own story, you're hopefully elevating them. You're not necessarily tearing down, but you're like giving them that flash of, oh my God, I had no idea. Like, I'm brushing my teeth, but I'm kind of wasting my time. I'm not coercing them. I'm just saying, hey, did you think about the poop on your teeth? That's what's going on there, dude. And then they go, wow, that's really gross. I'm going to go brush my teeth.
Yeah. Okay. So, yeah, I mean, you're not because we're talking about just briefly touching on ethics. Forcing someone to do something is one thing, right? That's a dictatorship. That's all the things that we in America, who truly value freedom above all else, autonomy, are vehemently opposed against. Inspiring people to be better is the name of the game, right? You inspire them by showing them a better story. that allows them to be able to take action and then be able to form a new identity through that action and that story, right? Going through that. What I'm curious on is you talked about that. You're right. I didn't think about stories in a building. I thought about the way that we operate through our lives is a series of stories. There's a series of stories of what this podcast means to you, what the guitar behind you means to you, what all these different stories mean, and that is the way that we perceive the world, because we are running through reality with our own virtual filter wrapped around us, our own perception, imagination. Some of them are stronger than the others. Some people completely live in the world of imaginations, and sometimes it goes into a psychosis and all those other ones. And other people can change the world because of that, right? Steve Jobs was famous for this. So these are for good or for ill, inspiring someone to become better in your own definition is a noble and worthy task. How does that relate? And without like leading the witness or anything here on this, talking about the hero's journey, right? And how does that relate to you personally for let's just say for the applications that you build in relation to the hero's journey, before I go into a bunch of other things?
Yeah. Well, so the hero's journey for me is a great source of ideas and inspiration about how people's stories can change. I mean, the hero's journey, just to kind of go over it, is that there's a separation, there's a transformation, and then there's a return. And so there is inherent in the hero's journey a transformation. And there are a whole bunch of archetypes for hero's journeys. Just a few of them. Overcoming self-limits is one, where the hero realizes that, they were limited by fear, limited by something. They find a hidden strength that they didn't know they had. Stronger together is a big one, which I think is really important, especially in the context of, I believe that virtual reality needs to move beyond just being as an individual experience. Most of it's still very individual and isolated. But we have tremendous social intelligence that, we are smarter together. And we need to build applications that enable us to take advantage of that. And stronger together is another, transformational, mechanism the inside of the hero's journey. Yeah. So for me, when I look at the hero's journey, I'm looking at it as a way of, how can I use that? How can I use that? What happens in that story? How could I use that and apply it to help kids be healthier, adopt better health habits? Stronger together. The corollary there is social. There are social theories of change, and role models, for example, developing role models, or developing a sense of self-efficacy, that you have this hidden power that you didn't know about. So it's kind of an interesting lens on thinking about that and developing some new solutions.
Yeah, there's definitely some things there, because what you're doing is you're more or less you're outsourcing your stories stronger together, right? And there's a weird thing, because humans, we are this individual unit that is completely independent against the world, as well as we are a collective organism. Just look at the internet, look what we're doing right now. Together, we're coming across. We are telling our individual stories to each other, inspiring each other and anybody else who may or may not be listening to other types of story models that they wouldn't perceive. And so we are these weird individual units, but also a balance of these collaborative units at the same time. And a couple of things you're talking about is the yin and the yang, my own internal beliefs, right? And then letting go of my internal beliefs to believe in the group, in the whole, and being able to shift that identity from I can't do this to, well, I'm a part of this group and I'm going to do it because I am a part of this group. And the group identity is stronger than the self identity, which allows an easier transition in that transformational change, right? So that's part of the reasons why that is so powerful. Is if you're looking to transform, find a group that's doing it and model their behavior, and then use social pressures to keep you to do the thing that you need to get done. That's part why, but that can be good or for ill. You can learn to brush your teeth, or you can go join a cult, as that is, but that's part of it, right? Cult, there's culture in that. So how do you, because I completely agree with you, by the way. I think where we're all moving to is a virtual world of a shared ecosystem where we're all inspiring each other together, and we can kind of raise that social standard, so that there will be that piece of the virtual metaverse that happens, as well as many other pieces that we don't wish existed, but that's because we're humans and that's what we do, the whole autonomy thing.
Well, yeah, I mean, I can only push in the positive directions that I see, and with the power that I have. Mm-hmm. And, I think, the vision of the metaverse aside, I think that where we are now, and you look ahead and you think about 10 years down the line, and what COVID has done for digital experiences, it's definitely propelled some big change. Yeah. I think we're going towards a world where VR, immersive, I don't draw strong distinctions between VR and AR and whatever XR, whatever are the art du jour. But I think that those things are going to be much more integrated into the rest of the digital technology landscape. And I think we're going to, like, enterprise and business applications are going to be really where the biggest uses are. Entertainment, cool, it'll be there, awesome. But I think the real power of VR is in helping people to be better when they take their headset off. And if we design with that in mind, not to imprison them or not to, be so sticky that they don't take it off, I think that's the goal. When they take the headset off, I want them to be better.
Love it. I completely agree with you. I haven't heard of the art du jour before, so that's the first one for me. I appreciate that. I've heard many of the other R's along the path, so that's a new one I'm gonna put in my catalog. What would you like ultimately for you? Like, what are the areas for you, are the hot areas that you would like to affect? I mean, if you could wave a magical VR wand and help people transform, what are the couple of major areas that you're deeply passionate about human transformation?
Well, I am really passionate about education. I think that most education is done so poorly. Mm-hmm. Just to say it. So that guitar back there, wherever that acoustic guitar, I built that guitar when I was 17, and I went to a guitar building school in Tennessee. I left high school and I went to build that thing, and it was the first real thing that I ever did. In school you do all these word problems and this and that, but like when you're building a guitar, if the neck isn't straight, it's not straight. You can't bullshit a piece of wood. So you learn patience. You learn something real, and then all these years later, I still have my guitar to play. That to me is the archetype of what experiences can be. That they're not just transformational in themselves, but now I understand how that thing works. I understand the physics of it a lot better. I understand how the sound is produced. I have all of these things that I bring with me. And I think we need to, let's just don't recreate the damn textbook in a virtual world. My graduate research was in teaching Japanese in a virtual world. I built a thing called Zengo Saiyu, which is about teaching language in a fully immersive experience. That was many years ago, very bleeding edge, but it really taught me a lot about, we can be very different learners, we can be very different people, we can be a lot more open and receptive, and virtual reality digital experiences should be designed to support that.
Yeah. Well, it's great because what's awesome about the guitar, one, I'm a big guitar music fan and all that stuff. I have my guitar over here to the side. I didn't build it. It was passed down to me. But what's amazing about what you just told there is that guitar is a totem of your transformation. It is a physical icon for you to look back and reflect of all the lessons learned encased in that guitar. Right. So you have all the memories, you have all the ideas, you have all the structures, and you got a sense of mastery from that taught you all the critical things that you need to know. Being unbiased about the facts, being able to learn patience and persistence and all the things. And if you can master one area of your life, it could be with a guitar, then you can take that to many different areas. So if you're successful in one area, I think there's like the Book of Five Rings talked about this. If you can understand something broadly, you can understand it narrowly. Or maybe I butchered that quote, but the point being is that, like, you mastered one area, then you can teach it the other subsects. And I agree that with virtual reality, you can definitely do that. And you shouldn't just put a whole bunch of books inside VR and have them read. And you shouldn't have people just type in VR. As people that spend time in VR could tell you that typing in VR is horrendous. So education, absolutely. Education is kind of a precursor to transformation, right? So without education, you can't be transformed, generally speaking. Hence, part of the stories is emotion plus education equals story. So again, and I'd like to kind of dial back into it, what are the areas or subcategories in terms of education light you up the most? What are you most passionate about teaching or designing so that the next generation can experience it and become transformed?
Well, I tend to be driven by problems, interesting problems. I think climate change is of course the biggest challenge that the world is facing, and it requires a lot of behavior. Really changes to our behavior and our habits and our norms. And so it's a very global thing, but it's a very personal kind of change. I think that says to me that's something interesting. I think language, I'm very interested in culture and language, and I studied language learning a lot, and how, what I think is interesting is it's the medium. Language is what we use to understand the world. And Japanese is the only other language I speak, so I only understand two frames. But I know those two languages are very different from like English and Japanese. And so it's Americans are terrible at foreign language, right? It's like, I studied French in school. It was a mess. But I think that things, cultural, historical things that bring us together are also really important. I'm pretty agnostic in terms of, give me an interesting problem and I'm like, on it like a kitten with a mitten. But I do think that I'm driven personally, if I get to choose, I'm driven by, climate change is huge. Racism is huge. How do we create experiences that are going to address racism? And we have more problems than we're able to solve. So those are just some.
Those are great. A couple things. I studied Japanese for a couple of years. I went to Japan for a little bit, not too long. Osaka, Tokyo, places like that. And I was with a Japanese family. Beautiful culture. I can probably order a beer and go to the bathroom still. I've lost a lot of the language. But there is some of my other friends that are more deeper in the languages and everything, that they were talking to me about, you almost have a personality shift when you switch from languages. When you switch, say, from Japanese to English, your identity shifts. So some of my friends that speak more of the Latin languages, and they shift back and around, they almost have a personality shift because of the languages that they learn, and the mindset that they have when they have that. Have you seen personalities or identity shifts as language changes?
Yeah, I mean, I lived in Japan for 7 years, and I mean, yes, definitely, there's a shift. You are sort of a different person. The kind of like I gave up trying to be Japanese. It's just like yeah, it's pretty awesome. And but I'm very much connected to the culture. My son is half Japanese, and so I'm very invested in learning and trying to talk to people. I think that it's a different personality. People would say your Japanese is good, but you don't talk like a Japanese person. Like the things that I think about and the things that I say are not. I mean, like I can pass, but I don't. I think it's fun to sort of be that changeling, be in the middle.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's a wonderful place. I love Japan so much, and it's great that you had that experience.
Yeah, you definitely went deeper than I did on the Japanese train, but it's one of those cultures, without going so deep in it, but they got amazing knowledge of the past, and they have they also have very future focused. I mean, their VR game is strong, I would say, in terms of people that are going to come out with some very intense, immersive experiences. And there's a lot of reasons for that. But it's one of those cultures that it's fascinating. A lot of my friends that are in the technical spaces, they all fall in love with the Japanese culture. At least there's a group of us that do that. One thing I want to touch on just a little bit about climate change. It's one of the hardest things I would say, in terms of design. It's one of the most important things I think you could be designing and building for is climate change, because of the catastrophe. But in terms of game-like empowerment for humans, it involves all the things that we're bad at, in terms of the things that we do affect climate change on a day-to-day basis, operating a car and all the packaged goods and all the things that we in our system, it's already built in and ingrained in our system. At the same time, we are it's very difficult for us to see these long-term changes where we're just a drop in the bucket and we have seemingly very little effect on, because it's like, well, what does it matter if I drive my car, if I don't drive my car, or what is it, that kind of thing. It feels like there's not, like, if everyone could vote and like flip a switch and go, I vote for save the world and fix climate change, and they could just flip a switch, I think everyone would do that. But because it's such a global problem, we feel so small, it seems like much like going to Mars is like a gigantic challenge, right? How would you break that off? Like, how would you inspire people? How would you create this global shift to avoid the catastrophe that is climate change? And what would you do with that?
Yeah, one of the other challenges. So I've done a little bit of work in this area, but one of the other challenges is that the changes that you're talking about there's a huge impact to a degree of warming, and that we're used to thinking in, like, if you look at typical games, you're getting gazillions of points, right? We like big impact. We like big. Well, I want to see the score like roll up, right? And 1 degree just feels anticlimactic, but it has a huge impact. And 2 degrees, I mean, we're hoping to keep it, below 2 degrees, right? So the other problem is that not just you are one speck, but that the problem itself is at a scale that people just don't understand. So I think that people, just like people change when their stories change, I think that people need to understand both the interrelated nature of things, not just that affecting the climate in any way, in any significant way, has all these downstream effects. And so if you think of it not in terms of we're going to get you what is the story I want to change? The story I want to change, I think, one of them is that somehow it doesn't matter. Like, it'll be okay. I don't live on the coast. Yeah, some people are going to get flooded. I don't care. But like, it's going to have, the glaciers in Greenland were 90 meters. Now they're 30 meters thick. And it's already happening, right? So it's really to understand the relationship, the interrelationship, the connected web of life, that if we do something over here, it's going to have an effect over here. And then you're not like trapped in the degree problem, right? The problem of showing real science, like real science-based things, and trying to be true to it, is that sometimes it's a lot of complexity, and our models aren't great, but they're getting better. But so if you want to stay true to the science, then what you need to do, you need to find ways that it can work in your favor, and that really takes a bunch of study. But like, for example, reducing the number of cars in half is a huge social change. It's going to have some effect, but like even in 2020, the consumption, the driving was way down, and we did okay. We did better in some areas, but like overall, we didn't solve global warming. And so that gives you a sense of the magnitude of change that we really need to do. And then, the positive impact of doing things like solar, and how you can have a positive effect, how you can do something that will make your life better, that does solve the problem.
Yeah, it's that combination of selfish and selfish, right? And that's what you really need, both, because you're talking about, if you're moving up Maslow's hierarchy of needs, people are like, hey, I'm just trying to find a way to put food on the table. I'm down here, and you're worried about the world, and this bigger problem, while I'm just trying to survive. And so that focus is different. So trying to find a way to integrate, because I mean, when it happens and it's here, we're all going to care about it, and we're all going to be like, why didn't someone do something about this 5-10 years ago?
Man, it's here. No, it's here.
I know.
I live in California. You live in California too. Yeah. Man, we got smoked out for weeks. It is here. It is not like down the road.
But what do people do about that? Like what is the action that they can take? Do they just stop driving, or what? Like, if you could transform everybody, because I mean, caring is one thing, right? I think everybody generally cares that they want the world to be better. I think but for the most part, minus probably big oil and gas or one of those other ones, mostly want the world to say, hey, if I could wave it and every car be electric, boom. If I could get solar on every roof, boom. How do we, like as designers, how do we make it something that's both selfish and selfless, and gets them to move store? Because I agree, this is an important issue. it's such a big task and an undertaking trying to think of how to accomplish that. You know, what's the bacteria poop acid on my teeth story for this? You know?
Well, I do not believe that most people care. I think that a lot of people care.
Mm-hmm.
Hopefully, a tipping point of people care, but there's clearly a lot of people in government who just don't give a damn, and they just want to pretend that it's not happening, and they go, "Oh, it's too expensive." COVID is a great example. We have a crappy healthcare system in our country. We spend $3 trillion on healthcare. We have the worst outcomes of any developed nation. 17% of our GDP is spent on healthcare, and it sucks.
Mm-hmm.
And we can't even mount a very cohesive, vaccination program for COVID. And the social inequities and the ethnic, inequities of the effect of COVID, it's because we have a long-term healthcare deficiency in so many subgroups in the United States. And so, what's the relevance there? The relevance there is people going, well, we can't afford a good healthcare system. We can't afford that. Now look at what, the impact of not having a good healthcare system is. Global warming, same thing. We can deny it. We can't afford it. We can't afford the Green New Deal. We can't afford that. We can't afford that because the economics drive their interests. And there's a lot of people working on this, both from the science perspective, from the social perspective. It is not an easy problem, but what can VR bring that the others can't? Or that other medium maybe can't do as well. And I think it is one of the foundations is that there's a lot of skepticism about sources of information, and I don't believe it. It's the New York Times. They're a bunch of lefty liberals, blah 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 blah. And there's something very immediate about VR where it's somewhat of you could kind of roughly group it under suspension of disbelief, but I interact with it in a way, it's that pre-attentive, preconscious kind of thing. I interact with it in a way, and it kind of sneaks in under my filter that goes, I don't believe in that. Where you say, and you have to be honest, right? You can't like just try to sugarcoat it or try. I think you got to be honest, right? You got to be true to the science. You got to be true. You got to have integrity. But I think the principle is to show people, what's the corollary to my Attack of the S Mutants? I think the corollary is to get people to open up first you have to recognize there's a problem. And in some ways you can bypass that. You can just say, hey, here's a system, here's a planet. It's not our planet, it's somebody else's planet. Look what happens when, and you can play with it. Like, okay, we're on planet Snog, and on planet Snog, the atmosphere is like this. And it takes a long time for that atmosphere to coalesce into something that will support life. We've got life. You look at Spore and games like that, but they pulled back from, they didn't make a real statement about that. I wish they had, but I do think that there are ways that you can create allegories and use metaphors and use other techniques to kind of get in. But that's the skill of being a designer.
Yeah. And
being true to your topic and really trying to do it well.
Yeah, it seems like, one of the pinnacles of design is if you can create transformation in your users, right? And give them hope or inspiration or abilities or actions or ways to get them. That's what a lot of documentaries are about. They're about like, here's this big problem. Take a look at this. Take action now, right? And that's it's a noble pursuit. And it, much like VR, it's not like all of a sudden overnight everyone went to bed and they wake up in the morning like, oh, VR is a thing. Like you being in the space for a long time, me being in it for a while as well. It's like lights going on in the city. It doesn't all happen at once at night when the sun sets, but over time everything comes on. So I think we're all awakening to the problem that is climate change. It's just if you can expedite by using VR as a technology, as a mass tipping point, where all of a sudden it gets caught on fire like Gundam Dance. Remember the old Gundam Dance, that whole thing? If we can instill that emotion of, oh my God, this thing is coming. It was very visceral when you said it was at 90 meters and now it's at 30 meters and you can see that thing going down. It's like watching our U.S. debt skyrocket. There's some ticker tape somewhere board going up. If there is some way to show that and be able to, and everyone see, oh, if I just take this one action each day, then I help with this and try to spread that out. It's just, it's one of those, it's an amazing concept. And I fully support you on the mission to go and doing it. It's just a tall order. It's like going to the moon. I support Elon Musk going to Mars. I don't want to be the guy making the rocket ships. But I definitely support it. And I'll be there at launch and I'll count down with him and I will do that. And just trying to hopefully inspire anybody that's listening or yourself to say, like, this is great. How do you do that? I'd love to find out how that is. Cause that's, you want to talk about literally saving the world, right? You can, and everyone saves the world in different ways. Sometimes we save families and the groups and communities, but that is a global world saving thing if you can make that happen. So I think it's incredible. Is that your holy grail? Is that like if at the end of all this stuff of you teaching people how to do proper design, inspiring them and letting them know how to, the responsibilities that they have and what they can do, like what is your holy grail end goal that you've got for being in the world of design and human transformation?
My holy grail. What's my life's work? It sounds
no
like
pressure or anything.
My life's work, I think, is what I'm really good at is that transformation of complex ideas into an experience. That's what I'm good at. And I have used, for me, VR is a tool. Like I'm not a true believer. I have a headset back there, but I'll use anything. I'll use the sock puppet. But I think that VR is more fun than a sock puppet. But I think that where I want to go is I'm very interested in sharing what I've learned from building virtual worlds, which is really an attitude about, it's taking the idea of, for example, experiential education and taking it to a kind of a next step. And, it's looking at the anatomy of an experience and what makes a human experience from the neuroscience and from the story concept and from the archetypes and the culture and the psychology and the personal and the interpersonal. It's really, that's the work that I'm doing now. And people can find me. So my last name is Rose, Howard Rose, howardrose.net. And I am starting a blog that people can come and check out. It's called Anatomy of Experience. And it's really looking and exploring in this way, throwing out some ideas about things that, things that I've seen, things that I've built, things that I just think are out there that are interesting. I've got a pretty good knowledge of the research in VR and health and psychology. And I'm going to offer, sort of, hey, check out this citation, because there's a lot of great work. There's a lot of great research going on, but it's not getting translated. And so part of my work is to help translate, the research, translate the psychology and the neuroscience into something that people can, wow, I can use that. Nobody's going to go and read those papers. Um, but there's some great things, and there's some great researchers out there, and so doing that translation for people, and telling that story and designing some, kick-ass new environments. That's what I'm about.
I love that. Yeah. To me, it sounds like you're on the path of the mentor. You've gone through your own hero's journey. You've lapped around. You've visited your own community, and now you're over at a hut waiting for the next hero to come along the path, going, "Hey, man, you want to come this way? I've got some things to tell you. Step into my hut. I'll show you. I'll
Well,
show you how to do." Or maybe it's a blog hut, So
it's a journey. I mean, that's the part about the journey, the hero's journey. It's not. I don't have all the answers, but I'm a little bit ahead because I started a little earlier, and it's just like I want to explore it, because I think the more that we explore it and expose the really positive things, and just look over there, look at that negative thing, that persuasion, that the negative uses of it, the more we understand it and shine some light there, the more that people are going to be aware of it. Rather than just go, "Oh my God, this is the best technology since sliced bread. Everything about it is great." I think that's just not realistic, and it has not been true about any technology up to date. And so it sure as hell is not about, VR is not all, it's not all positives. So let's just put it out there, be honest about it, talk about it so people are aware, and push it in the most positive direction we can.
That's beautiful. It's all we can do with technology. Take it and use it for what we can, and spread the message. And I mean, that's all you can do in the space of using this stuff, is say, "Hey, here's what I stand for. Here's what I do. Here's how I use it," and inspire other people to do the same. I mean, that's what mentors do, and that's what people that are on the path with. So, Howard, I really appreciate this time with you, man. I hope people do reach out for what you're doing. And is there any last words or things you want to let people know about before we sign off?
Well, just please come visit me, howardrose.net, or you can find it under anatomyofexperience.com. And if you would come and check it out and leave comments, and let's develop the conversation. Let's really make it work.
Love it. Thank you, Howard. I really appreciate your time today.
Thank you so much. Take care. Thanks for the opportunity, and I wish you the best. Take care.